Clara Henderson and her daughter Emily lived under the same roof, but one secret would turn love into murder, leaving a father shattered and a family destroyed. The Henderson family lived in a quiet, tree-lined suburb where every house looked almost identical, and life appeared perfect on the surface. To outsiders, Clara Henderson, a 45-year-old mother, had it all: a beautiful home, a loving husband, and a teenage daughter who excelled at school. She was always impeccably dressed, with a poised demeanor that gave an impression of control and warmth. Neighbors often complimented her on her parenting and the way she kept her home immaculate, unaware of the storm that brewed behind closed doors. Clara had perfected the art of maintaining appearances, masking the darker impulses that simmered beneath her carefully curated life. Her daughter Emily was 17, bright, perceptive, and unusually intuitive for her age. Unlike many teenagers, Emily had a keen eye for the subtleties of human behavior, noticing the tension in a glance, the fleeting shadow of fear in someone's expression. She loved her mother but could not shake the uneasy feeling that had begun to creep into her mind over the past months. Emily noticed the subtle changes in her father, Richard, a man in his late 40s who had once been the backbone of the family. Richard had grown quieter, more withdrawn, and almost invisible in the household. There was a nervous stiffness to his movements, a hesitancy in his voice, and a sense of wariness in his eyes that had not been there before. Emily had watched as he started avoiding certain rooms, answering phone calls with a strained politeness, and retreating to his study for hours without explanation. At first, she thought it might be work stress, but the consistency of the signs, coupled with her intuition, told her something far more sinister was unfolding. It started with small observations. Emily noticed her mother's overly critical comments aimed at her father, phrased as concern but carrying a weight of control. Clara would chastise him over minor mistakes, correct his tone when speaking, and subtly humiliate him in front of Emily under the guise of teaching him life lessons. She monitored his every action, keeping track of finances, schedules, and even his friendships, and had an uncanny way of making Richard doubt himself. The tension was palpable, even in moments that seemed ordinary, like dinner or watching television together. As Emily became more alert to these changes, she began to piece together a pattern of behavior that had likely been happening for years. Clara's controlling nature was not limited to small domestic decisions. It extended to manipulating emotions, isolating Richard from people who might notice, and ensuring that no one could question her authority. Emily sensed the danger her father was in, but felt powerless to confront it directly. Yet her resolve was growing. She began quietly observing, taking mental notes, and planning how she could uncover the truth. Every sigh her father suppressed, every forced smile, and every whispered argument she overheard became clues that painted a portrait of a life under siege. Despite the fear that crept into her thoughts, Emily felt a strange clarity. She realized she had the advantage of seeing everything through eyes that were not clouded by fear, shame, or complicity. She understood that if she acted carefully, she could uncover the reality her mother worked so hard to conceal. With each passing day, Emily's determination grew stronger, fueled by a growing sense of injustice and the quiet hope that exposing her mother might finally free her father from the invisible chains that bound him. The tension within the household was thickening, and the cracks in Clara's perfect facade were beginning to show, though neither of them could yet predict how far the darkness would ultimately reach. Emily had always been observant, but as the days passed, her attention to detail sharpened into something more deliberate and intense. She began keeping track of her father's routines, noticing which rooms he avoided, the subtle winces when he moved in certain ways, and the times when his phone would ring but he wouldn't answer. At first, she thought she might be imagining things, allowing her mind to conjure fears where none existed. But as she paid closer attention, the evidence of something sinister emerged in undeniable patterns. Clara's control over her father was far more extensive than Emily had imagined. It wasn't just verbal abuse or manipulation. It was systematic, strategic, and terrifyingly effective. Every time Richard tried to reach out for support or show signs of independence, Clara intercepted it, steering him back into the tight, invisible cage she had built around him. Emily's curiosity soon evolved into investigation. She began quietly searching through the house for physical evidence, moving carefully to avoid arousing her mother's suspicion. Late at night, after Clara had gone to bed, Emily accessed Richard's study, looking through emails, receipts, and hidden documents. What she found was shocking. Clara had been siphoning large sums of money from her father's business accounts, forging signatures, and masking transactions so skillfully that no outsider would have noticed. These weren't mere mistakes or small acts of theft. They were deliberate, premeditated moves that had jeopardized her father's financial stability for years. Every discovery made Emily's heart race, filling her with both fear and a growing sense of urgency. But the financial crimes were only part of the story. Emily uncovered records of threatening messages and vague notes that hinted at physical intimidation. Photos revealed bruises on her father's arms and back, carefully hidden beneath clothing, and a series of doctor visits that Clara had orchestrated to appear routine. It became horrifyingly clear that Richard was living under a shadow of fear, his life meticulously controlled in a way that left him isolated and helpless. Emily felt a mix of anger, dread, and helplessness, knowing that her father was trapped and that exposing the truth would not be simple. The more she uncovered, the more dangerous her mother seemed. Clara had a way of charming outsiders, presenting herself as the caring, dedicated wife and mother. But Emily now understood that this was a mask, a carefully constructed farce, designed to conceal her darker instincts. Clara's manipulations were calculated. She had anticipated the possibility of resistance and had likely prepared ways to silence it. Every step Emily took in gathering evidence required extreme caution, as a single misstep could provoke Clara's wrath. Emily began planning her next moves with precision. She documented everything she could, taking photos, writing notes, and organizing evidence into categories. She studied her mother's patterns, trying to predict her behavior, understanding that any confrontation could spiral into dangerous territory. There was a heavy weight of fear in the air, but Emily's determination grew with each discovery. She realized that she was no longer just observing. She was preparing to act, to save her father, and to confront the truth no matter the personal risk. Each night, Emily lay awake in her room, the faint hum of the house around her, replaying the day's discoveries and imagining the confrontation to come. The tension in the Henderson household was escalating, the calm facade of suburban life cracking under the weight of secrets too dark to ignore. Emily knew she had uncovered something far more serious than she had anticipated, and the urgency of exposing it was now inseparable from her own survival instincts. The shadows in her home were deepening, and with every revelation, the line between danger and justice became narrower. Threatening to erupt at any moment, Emily had reached a point where observation alone was no longer enough. The more she discovered about her mother, the more urgent it became to act. She had amassed a significant amount of evidence: photographs of bruises on her father, screenshots of threatening messages, financial records showing embezzlement, and documents detailing Clara's manipulative schemes. Each piece of evidence revealed a layer of her mother's cruelty, a layer that Richard had endured silently for years. Emily knew that confronting Clara directly could be dangerous, but she also understood that inaction might allow the abuse to continue indefinitely. She could no longer wait. The time for planning had passed, and the need for action became unavoidable. The day Emily decided to confront her mother, tension clung to the household like a thick fog. Every sound, every movement, seemed magnified. Richard remained unusually quiet, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. Emily felt a pang of guilt and concern, realizing how deeply he had been affected, how powerless he had felt against the relentless control exerted by Clara. She carefully rehearsed her steps, thinking through how to present the evidence in a way that would not only reveal the truth, but also protect her father from immediate retaliation. Yet, despite her meticulous preparation, a gnawing sense of dread lingered, reminding her that Clara was unpredictable and dangerous. As the moment drew nearer, Emily observed Clara with heightened scrutiny. Her mother moved through the house with the same polished efficiency, a smile on her face, but Emily could sense a tension beneath it. Clara had begun noticing small changes in Emily's behavior. Her secrecy, the extra time spent in her father's study, the subtle avoidance of her mother's gaze. It was as though Clara's instincts were warning her that something was amiss, that a storm was approaching. Emily felt the pressure mounting, understanding that her mother's capacity for control extended beyond intimidation. she was capable of extreme measures if she felt her secrets were threatened. Emily decided to start with her father, showing him the evidence she had gathered over the weeks. Richard's reaction was a mixture of relief, fear, and disbelief. The weight of years of manipulation and abuse seemed to lift slightly as he realized that someone, his daughter, had seen the truth and understood the danger he had been living under. Yet the realization also brought an acute awareness of immediate danger. Clara's reaction when confronted with the inevitability of exposure was impossible to predict, and Emily knew that any misstep could escalate the situation into violence. As Emily prepared to confront Clara, she felt a surge of determination tempered by anxiety. She had taken all possible precautions, but she was aware that her mother was not just cunning, she was ruthless. The house seemed to hold its breath, the quiet punctuated only by distant sounds from the suburban street outside. Emily understood that this confrontation was not just about revealing the truth, it was about survival, about protecting her father from further harm, and about facing the darkness that had been lurking in their home for far too long. Each heartbeat echoed the tension in the room, each second a reminder of the stakes involved. The calm of their suburban life had been shattered, and the inevitable clash between mother and daughter loomed, a confrontation that would push the boundaries of fear, courage, and the human capacity for control. The air in the Henderson household had grown impossibly tense, each moment stretched taut like a string ready to snap. Clara's presence filled the rooms with an almost suffocating intensity, her eyes sharp and calculating, always scanning for the slightest sign of defiance. Emily, aware of the danger she faced, moved cautiously, her body on edge with anticipation. She knew that Clara had been watching her closely for weeks, observing her subtle changes in behavior. And now, with the confrontation imminent, the household seemed like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Every creak of the floorboards, every muted sound from the street outside, felt amplified, as though the world itself were holding its breath. Richard had retreated to a corner of the living room, silent and pale, the weight of years of manipulation etched deeply into his posture. Emily tried to steady her own nerves, reminding herself of the evidence she had painstakingly collected over weeks. Each photo, document, and screenshot represented a piece of the truth, a weapon against the control her mother had wielded so effectively. Yet, as she prepared to confront Clara, a gnawing fear filled her chest. She understood with a cold clarity that her mother's instinct for self-preservation was extreme and unpredictable. Clara had already demonstrated a capacity for deception, emotional manipulation, and intimidation, but Emily was about to discover just how far her mother could go when cornered. The confrontation began in subtle ways. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion betraying her otherwise calm demeanor. She moved with the grace of someone confident in their power, yet there was a tension in her shoulders that Emily had never seen before. The slightest shift in Emily's gaze, the quiet firmness of her voice, seemed to provoke a flicker of unease in Clara. In that moment, the illusion of control began to crack. Clara's reaction was quick, deliberate, and terrifying in its intensity. Within seconds, the situation escalated far beyond anything Emily had anticipated. Clara's hand reached for the hidden gun she had kept for months, a weapon she had prepared in secret for the day someone threatened her carefully constructed life. The first shot rang out like a clap of thunder, shattering the fragile normalcy of their suburban home. Emily froze, her instincts screaming, but Clara's intent was merciless. One shot followed another in rapid succession, each one striking with precision and force. Emily had no time to react, her mind racing as the violence unfolded around her. The sound of gunfire reverberated through the walls, and the life that had seemed so fragile, yet so full of potential, was extinguished in an instant. By the time the neighbors, alerted by the deafening shots, called the police, the house had fallen silent. Emily lay motionless on the living room floor, a tragic victim of a mother's desperate measures to protect her secrets. Richard, paralyzed with shock and grief, could barely comprehend the scene before him. Clara, whose calm exterior had always masked the darkness within, now stood exposed in the most horrifying way possible. The aftermath of the shooting revealed the chilling reality. A mother's obsession with control had escalated to murder, and the very family she claimed to protect had been destroyed in the process. The suburban street, once serene and orderly, now bore witness to a crime that would haunt the community for years to come, a stark reminder that the most dangerous threats often come from within the walls of one's own home. The aftermath of the tragedy at the Henderson household sent shockwaves through the quiet suburban neighborhood. News of the shooting spread quickly, and the once pristine streets were suddenly filled with the presence of police cars, flashing lights, and the low murmur of anxious neighbors. The community struggled to reconcile the horrifying events with the image of the Henderson family they had always admired. Clara Henderson, once seen as a devoted mother and wife, was now the subject of intense scrutiny, her carefully constructed façade completely shattered. Investigators moved swiftly, documenting every inch of the house, collecting forensic evidence, and piecing together the sequence of events that had led to the devastating shooting. As the investigation unfolded, the true extent of Clara's manipulation and abuse came to light. Emily's meticulous records became crucial pieces of evidence, painting a vivid picture of years of emotional, financial, and physical control. Police discovered that Clara had carefully orchestrated her life to maintain dominance over her husband, isolating him from friends and family, controlling every financial decision, and instilling a pervasive sense of fear. Her crimes extended far beyond the immediate violence. The authorities found clear evidence of embezzlement, coercion, and threats that revealed a calculated pattern of cruelty. The realization that a mother could escalate her control to murder stunned everyone involved, highlighting the terrifying consequences of unchecked manipulation within a family. Richard, though physically unharmed, was left emotionally shattered. Years of living under his wife's control had eroded his confidence, leaving him vulnerable and fearful. Emily's death compounded his grief, leaving him with an overwhelming sense of loss and guilt. Investigators noted that Richard's compliance had been a survival mechanism, a way to avoid provoking Clara's anger. Yet, it was Emily's courage, her determination to uncover the truth, that ultimately exposed the horrifying reality of the household. The irony was cruel. The daughter who had sought to protect her father and reveal the truth had become the most immediate victim of her mother's wrath. The media seized upon the story, painting a chilling portrait of the Henderson family and the deadly consequences of hidden abuse. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior weighed in, describing the case as a stark reminder that domestic manipulation can escalate to extreme violence when left unchecked. Commentators highlighted how Clara had mastered the art of deception, presenting a loving and composed exterior to the outside world while harboring dangerous impulses behind closed doors. The narrative struck a chord with viewers and readers alike, serving as both a cautionary tale and a grim exploration of human cruelty. Legal proceedings against Clara began with prosecutors charging her with multiple offenses including murder, abuse, and financial crimes. The court case became a focal point for public attention, revealing the intricate web of control Clara had woven over the years. Emily's evidence played a pivotal role in ensuring that justice would be pursued, even in her absence. The trial underscored the devastating impact of familial abuse, showing how manipulation and secrecy can create a breeding ground for violence. In the end, the Henderson case left a haunting legacy. It exposed the darkest corners of suburban life, the hidden dangers that can exist behind closed doors, and the bravery of a young girl who sought to protect those she loved. While the court would determine Clara's punishment, the emotional scars left on the family and community would linger indefinitely. The tragedy served as a chilling reminder that evil often wears a familiar face, and that vigilance, courage, and awareness are sometimes the only tools to confront it before it escalates beyond control.